Welcome to the broadcast, my dearlings. What an extraordinary day, because it's 1 year since the late Queen Elizabeth died. 1 whole year has flown by, and it's time to reflect on 1 year since the death of Elizabeth, and also to reflect and celebrate 1 year since King Charles III ascended the throne. This is also Accession Day. So mixed feelings, but hopefully not too much sadness, and a lot of joy in both remembrance and celebration and praise, because the King is receiving praise from most all quarters. Aside from a few pieces that I've seen in some media, the general consensus is that the King has been off to a flying start, an immaculate beginning to his reign. When you consider what he was up against, what he is up against, he has performed with great aplomb. Shall we look at some of the tributes issued on behalf of the royal family? In loving and everlasting memory, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, 21st of April 1926 to the 8th of September 2022. His Majesty wrote from Balmoral Castle in marking the first anniversary of Her late Majesty's death and my accession. We recall with great affection her long life, devoted service, and all she meant to so many of us. I am deeply grateful too for the love and support that has been shown to my wife and myself during this year, as we do our utmost to be of service to all. And His Majesty furnished us with this previously unreleased image taken by Cecil Beaton in 1968 from a sitting with Her late Majesty. The Prince and Princess of Wales said that today we remember the extraordinary life and legacy of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth. We all miss you, W and C. Their Majesties were greeted by well-wishers at Crathy Kirk and attended the church for a private service of prayer. They were joined by the children of the late Margaret Rose, Lady Sarah Chatto, and the Earl of Snowdon, who presumably are staying with their Majesties at Balmoral. The Earl was accompanied by his daughter, Lady Margarita Armstrong-Jones, and Lady Sarah by her husband Daniel and her children Samuel and Arthur. Princess Eugenie paid tribute to her late granny, thinking of you today, missing you so much, but remembering what a life of service, love and dedication to everyone and to your family who loved you so much. Forever grateful to you and always in my heart. And her mother, the Duchess of York, said you were a wonderful friend, a mentor, a second mother to me and grandmother to my daughters, who share so much of your courage and heart. You will always be loved and missed by our family and by our nation. As we mourn a year on, we also celebrate the wonderful times we shared with Her late Majesty the Queen. She entrusted me with the care of her corgis, Sandy and Mick, and I am delighted to say they are thriving. That's nice news, and Agent High Heels trotted in to pay her tribute as well, Angela Kelly, the late Queen's dresser. I miss her, and you will always be in our hearts. I will never forget you. I will always love you. I miss you, my friend. Why all these people think that the late Queen is looking down and reading Instagram posts is beyond me. But c'est la vie, I suppose it's a thought that counts. The Prince and Princess of Wales attended a small private service at St David's Cathedral in Haverfordwest, and it looks beautiful there, doesn't it? St David's is the smallest city in Britain, and the both of them were stunning. Catherine in a burgundy coat by Eponine, the hat by Sahar Millinery, and silver jubilee diamond and pearl earrings that belonged to the late Elizabeth. She clutches a mulberry Bayswater in cranberry suede and trots around in Gianvito Rossi pumps in Royal Burgundy. They laid a floral tribute in white roses. Those heels are high, aren't they, my dears? Gotta give it to her. The highest of heels that she can get around on, she does, and I'm certainly not complaining about that. We love a stiletto, and so does our future Queen. And Prince William had a fabulous day in Bournemouth. The crowds went wild for him. There was a frenzy, and his visit was largely unannounced, but he rocked up there, and he visited Pret in Bournemouth to highlight his homelessness initiative. And there was a surprise appearance by a footballer that's very well known here in the kingdom. He was very, very famous in the 90s, Paul Gascoigne, known as Gazza, and he's had a lot of troubles since then in his life, but he's scraped through and done very well, and he's a very popular figure. And he's met William a few times, and he kissed Diana's hand all those decades ago, and he made his way into Pret, and he said he didn't even know that William would be in town, but he fought through the crowds, fought to see William. And he said, "Oi, Prince, it's me. Remember me? It's old Gazza." And William was delighted to see him, and he was treated. Prince William was treated to a great big smackaroonie on the cheek. Well, actually, it just missed, but a nice little air kiss there. A lovely, tender, affectionate moment. And as you know, my dear, I'm old-fashioned. I don't really care to see royalty being smothered in kisses and selfies and all these other indignities. To be quite honest with you, I don't. I'm old-fashioned and I'm stuck up, but that doesn't mean that the images don't warm the cockles of my heart sometimes, and on this occasion they certainly did. So I was pleased to see it. And somebody else that was very much impressed by Prince William was Stephen Bartlett. And I've spoken about him before because he does a great podcast YouTube series, Diary of a CEO. He's a very, very successful, rich entrepreneur. And I've recommended his YouTube channel to you before. It's hit and miss for my taste. That, I pick and choose the characters that I want to listen to. But in general, it can be time quite nicely invested to see what all these rather successful people have to say, their story. But Stephen Bartlett is much admired by the young ones coming up in particular. And what I've appreciated about Stephen Bartlett this week, in the wake of hanging out with William in his capacity as a new advocate for the Homewards initiative, what I've appreciated is the fact that he is not backwards in coming forwards with sharing his excitement for meeting our future king and for showering him with praise and singing his praises. Because especially when you are playing to a young audience these days, some of whom might fall under the woke category, these characters risk alienating a lot of their fans. And some of them daren't speak about such things as the fruits of empire and royalty and admiration for conservatism with a small c, regardless of party. And I appreciate the fact that Stephen Bartlett has not been shy about saying so. He was utterly impressed, quite enchanted and smitten with our future king. And I think it'll be a very healthy alliance going forward. A very healthy alliance. So it's good to have him on board. He said, "I was lucky enough to have a few moments to ask the future king some questions about his own personal motivations, how he manages and allocates his time. This is just the beginning of a big piece of work we're planning to do with Prince William, his foundation Homewards, and the UK business community to help get homeless people and former inmates back into work, to upskill them and to end homelessness for good." Very encouraging. And I will share with you a whisper that I received, which is an exclusive whisper, and that is that Prince William has actually been asked to join Stephen Bartlett for a little cosy chat on the podcast. Whether or not that will come to fruition is a completely different question. But it is certainly my understanding that he has been invited to do so. And actually, although I wouldn't want a habit made of this kind of thing, I am not opposed to it. He went on to say, "If you had told me as a kid I would be spending the day with Prince William, the future king, I would never ever believed you. I grew up with a Nigerian mother and an English dad who both adored the royal family. One of my earliest memories is watching my mum and dad cry when Diana died. William has a wonderful way with people, and he was authentically kind both on and off camera. Incredibly intelligent and so patient." Well, we all knew that, didn't we, my dears? We didn't have a single doubt about him, despite any other aspersions cast or any attempts at upstaging. Now, the Earl Marshal, who has had a monstrously busy year, a monstrously busy couple of years, the Earl Marshal, Duke of Norfolk, our most senior peer, has been speaking about the great responsibility he faced in the wake of the late Queen's death. And he said that he had been planning the state funeral for the past 20 years and was very nervous until the last minute. It is the hereditary responsibility of his family to organise all these major ceremonial occasions. And to be quite honest with you, I've told you before, multitasking is not my forte. And just the very thought of having such a heavy burden and weight of responsibility on one's shoulders, I mean, well, that would be enough to drive me to daily panic attacks, I think, my dear, and I would probably have to completely surrender the role and the family estate and that hereditary responsibility to somebody else, because it really is a huge undertaking. And there was another few articles, but there was actually a very good one on the Mail online. Was it today or yesterday? Possibly yesterday, detailing all the things that went on behind the scenes when Operation London Bridge and Operation Unicorn, because the late Queen died in Scotland, when they swung into action, how various hundreds, thousands of troops had to be called in, some of them with just immediate notice, get here now. They had to leave honeymoons, they had to leave family weddings in their hundreds and thousands, and everything had to come together flawlessly, and it did. And when you read about the logistics of it, it is absolutely overwhelming, and it really does make one have great faith in the abilities of the people in this nation and the way everything just went tickety-boo, didn't it? It went tickety-boo and looked graceful and elegant and unflustered. Well, behind the scenes that certainly wasn't the case, and these kind of articles are worth reading, because it gives one such appreciation for these unsung heroes. I really do have. And by the way, I'm mentioning the Duke of Norfolk here. I think it is worth writing to him if you are a fan of the way that he curated the Jubilee, the late Queen's funeral, everything in the wake of that, the accession and the coronation. Can you imagine being at the helm and having such responsibility and doing a flawless, beautiful job? I can't say that I know which official address to reach him at, but he does have an address available at the House of Lords that you can find. His home is Arundel Castle, one of his many homes, but that is his official base, if you will. I wouldn't necessarily recommend writing there. I don't think it'll find his way to him, but you never know. But it's worth popping a little card in the post of thanks if you feel inspired to do so, because he deserves it. Well, he started planning, as I say, 20 years ago, after the death of his own father, and he had a staff officer at the time, Colonel Mather, and he had been in command of the bearer party at Winston Churchill's funeral. So he, as a sort of sidekick, if you will, had invaluable experience of organising big state funerals of that ilk. And at the very first meeting all those years ago, a sort of committee, if you will, there were 12 people present, and then that evolved all the way up to last year, when at the last meeting before the death there were 282 people present at the meeting. So all this was going on in preparation for that day. They were in an advanced state of readiness. Gun salutes were fired today at midday in Hyde Park and at the Tower of London, and the bells were rung at Westminster Abbey, the glorious sound of pealing bells for Accession Day on this bittersweet occasion. Another one who did very well at the coronation and at many royal functions was gorgeous Floella Benjamin. And she's been making quite a few appearances with the likes of Giles Brandreth, Judi Dench, a lot of the Lovey set. The king loves his loveys, doesn't he? And I say that with no disparagement, because I love a lovey too. I might even consider myself one. Well, she has been recollecting and speaking about her relationship with the late Queen, and she was recalling the time in 2012, the time of the Diamond Jubilee, when Floella was Chancellor at Exeter University. She was the first black and female Chancellor at that university. And she had lunch with the Queen. The Queen came to visit, Queen Elizabeth, and they sat next to each other. And she speaks about the Queen. She says she was remarkable. She says she was a walking encyclopedia, knew everything about everything. And afterwards, Floella shared her story with the Queen about her upbringing in Trinidad. And she said they were taught more about British history than their own history in Trinidad. And when she came over to Britain, she loved the place but was very dismayed to find elements of adversity and some racism. This was in 1960, and she told the Queen all about her experience, but she was telling Her late Majesty that she forgave them all, that she had no hatred in her heart. And that is how they connected, because she said that the late Queen sort of sat back in her chair and she said her blue eyes twinkled. She mentioned how stunning and striking those blue eyes were. They twinkled, they danced. And she told Floella, she said, listening to you speak like this reminds me of my conversations with Nelson Mandela, because apparently he shared the same philosophy, the same attitude for life, the philosophy of forgiveness. And she recalled how the late Queen exemplified this attitude of forgiveness by going to Northern Ireland, for example, speaking in Irish at that time and shaking the hand of Martin McGuinness, in the atmosphere and the intention of reconciliation, forgiveness. And she tells us that just a couple of days before Her late Majesty died, she was reading Floella's book. Now, I can't verify if this is true, but Floella tells us there is a photograph of Her late Majesty with the book there in the background. I haven't seen it myself, so I don't know. I'm not here to confirm this plug for the book. But we'll give the benefit of the doubt. She says that she was reading Floella's autobiography, What Are You Doing Here? And as she was doing it, that is when she gave the nod and she said, I want Floella Benjamin to be appointed to the Order of Merit. And after she died, Floella was appointed to that very rare and exclusive order with a tiny handful of others. A nice recollection, simply to point us all in the direction of forgiveness, and in the late Queen's case, of faith. And I can't speak about the late Queen without mentioning her faith. And I don't do this in order to try and sound pious or even enthusiastic about religion. So take it in the spirit of just sharing what inspired the late Queen. And the Christian faith is inextricably linked to monarchy. One guest of the late Queen's, as we know, in her very final days and final weekend, really, was the Right Reverend Dr. Ian Green-Shields. He was a guest of the Queen at Balmoral. There were 6 people at the dinner, the last dinner that he had with the Queen while he was staying there for 3 nights. Actually, all 3 nights there were these 6 people gathered. It was him, the late Queen, Anne, Timothy, Sophie, and John Warren, the late Queen's horse trainer and racing manager. And he said that when he turned up, she was frailer than he expected. He knew she'd be frail, but frailer than expected in body, but mentally sharp, totally there to the very last, and contemplative. She was preoccupied, he says, in particular with her faith and that of her father, King George VI. And at that time, he was moderator of the General Assembly. And during their conversations, he says that it would have been normal for a moderator, such as he was, to talk about matters of faith. But he says that he was very interested in how much she wanted to talk about her own. She wanted to talk about it. She had remarkable recall. She had no regrets, none, and was very much at peace. She mentioned her father and the great influence his faith had on her. And I wanted to do a very short reading at the end of this broadcast, and I found a poem that is linked to King George and Elizabeth with regards to faith as well. So I'll read that at the end of the broadcast. Look at this new jewel that has been manufactured and released as a tribute to the late Queen. You can tell me if you think it's rather lovely or rather gaudy and vulgar. This coin is estimated to have a worth of £18.5 million, and it was unveiled by the London-based brand East India Company to mark the anniversary. It is known as the Crown Coin, 1 kilogram of gold with 10 24-carat gold coins and over 6,000 little diamonds. There are also 5 official portraits illustrated on the jewel. And the East India Company was the paragon of British imperialism. It was set up to exploit India's wealth and her resources, and it ended up governing large parts of the country in the process. Well, it's certainly very sparkly, isn't it, my dears? Feel free to chuck one of those in my privy purse, if you will. RAF Northolt paid tribute to the late Queen with a parade and a 1-minute silence. An area at the church was dedicated for private reflection for all personnel. I'm going to read a short extract from a poem to end the broadcast. Originally the poem was called God Knows by Minnie Louise Haskins, but became known as The Gate of the Year. It was read out by King George VI at his Christmas broadcast of 1939, and it was actually handed to him by the young Princess Elizabeth. And the word is that it was suggested by the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who had a bit of a fancy for the poem, and actually she went on to have it engraved on stone plaques and fixed to the gates of the King George VI Memorial Chapel, where both of them now and their daughter are interred. But after it was read at that broadcast to the Empire, it became forever associated with King George VI. It was written in 1908, and I realise it was written about the Gate of the Year, presumably a new year, you know, December, January time. So I realise it's possibly a little out of context, but I think that I can recite it to you in the spirit of how fond the royal family are of it, and also that it represents a royal year. 1 year as an anniversary for our beloved late Queen Elizabeth, but also a full and first year of the reign of King Charles III. And I think that it is one that we can all be proud of, that His Majesty can be proud of, and that his late mummy would have been exceptionally proud of. She really, really would. And of that I have absolutely no doubt. So on that note, I will wish you a wonderful weekend ahead. I will say thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate your company. Do leave me some fruity thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra, my dear, and toodle pip. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown. And he replied, go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, trod gladly into the night.